Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're very excited to welcome Mr. Eric Lohman, General Manager at Monarch Beach Golf Links and currently the Secretary of the Southern California PGA on our Executive Board of Directors for the section. Good morning, Eric. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to present, and just glad that everybody could wake up early and join us today. Today we've got I wanted to present a PowerPoint presentation that speaks to sort of hiring and training people and creating a winning culture and sustainable culture, business culture at your properties. I know this is something that we've worked really hard here at Monarch Beach and at other properties that I've worked at, and we've obviously, and I've spent some time kind of fine-tuning my approach and our approach, and certainly what we're doing today is something different than we might have done 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But we're very lucky here at Monarch to have a great team. I've had a good team here now for several years. We've lost a few people who've moved on to better positions and more responsibility, and I was able to be a part of that and help those folks out as well. So as I jump into this PowerPoint, if anybody has any questions, I'm not quite sure how you ask them, but I'm sure John can interrupt me and let me know. And obviously, John, if you have any questions, just interrupt me and we'll go from there. But moving into slide number 2, we'll jump right into it. Obviously, to build a culture, a winning culture, it really helps to understand, the goal of what that would be. You could say winning or a good culture or a prosperous culture, but what is that? What does that mean? How do you define what that is? And one of the first things we did here at Monarch, which I would recommend we do anywhere, is that you really take the time to learn about your facility or your facilities, learn about the strengths of your facility, the weaknesses, learn about the staff, where you're located, really try to define who you are and what you are, and especially where you are. And these are just some of the things that we've done here or looked at to help us do that. And obviously, it doesn't happen overnight, and the more you can involve your other managers or your staff to help you define these things, the better off you will be. But one of the first things I did when I got here was I wrote a vision facility statement. And, taking into consideration what the asks were of our ownership group and also the management company. I work for OB Sports, which is now a subsidiary at Troon Golf, but it's really important that you understand sort of, who you are and who you work for and what they want, and then you can build a game plan around that, and then you can hire and train and cultivate a staff to support those goals. So obviously I took some time and I wrote a vision facility statement, and if John can remind me, I will. I have no problem sharing the one that we utilize for Monarch Beach. And when you get sent that, and I don't have a slide that shows it, but it's a 3 or 4 paragraph statement that just sort of defines what we are and who we are and where we are here at Monarch. And I've changed it several times over the years as well. As our operation has changed or morphed, we've changed that vision statement, and it's something I'd recommend that you do as well. So each and every time I kind of train a new group of staff here at Monarch, I will review that statement and make modifications if necessary. So the statement that we have has been probably amended half a dozen times over the years. But to start at the very top, what is the preferred result and how do you get there? And obviously, depending on who you work for, if it's a private club, an equity membership, non-equity club, a resort, a public golf course, daily fee, 9-hole driving range, there is a preferred result, and whether that's making a budget or whether it's your reviews, the satisfaction from your customers, or if it's retention, there's certainly something in there that you need to hold on to and that will help determine the success or failure of your operation. And these things are very, very important to define with that the vision facility statement, and obviously your managers have to understand where success and failure lies, so that when you do build that culture and you do hire people to support that, and then you hold them accountable and recognize them, that you're doing it to something that has some metrics. And here at Monarch Beach, for example, the budget is very important to us, obviously, and we look at a few things like employee voice, which is, in our case, employee voice is what does our staff think about their jobs and their roles, and I guess now in this day and age, their safety and those things. So obviously, employee voice is extremely important. And then customer voice, those are, what are your guests and members, vendors, what do they think of you and your team and what you're doing, and how you're living up to the brand promise that you've made. And so in our case, reviews are very important to us, whether they're reviews we get from our resort guests or reviews from the golfers who just play golf, or and we have two metrics here that we use two companies that support that initiative, and then we also read every online review that comes through, whether that's Yelp or TripAdvisor, Golf Advisor, Google, Facebook. There's probably a few other ones out there I can't quite recall, but we certainly appreciate and understand the importance and the role that social media and online reviews play. So obviously employee voice, customer voice, and then top line revenue, which is really important to us, and then bottom line revenue, which is the flow through to the bank, the money that you've made minus all your expenses. It's what your owners truly get as a result of all our efforts. And then, when you take into consideration all of these things, you hopefully then established a brand, and then hopefully you live up to that brand. But like I said, we'll share our vision facility statement with you, and you'll understand a little bit more about what we're trying to accomplish with this slide. And I just put a little quote here from Harold Schultz from Starbucks, something I missed this morning, something I really wish I had right now in front of me. But hiring people is an art, not a science, and resumes can't tell you whether someone will fit into a company's culture. And I tell you, the hiring process and the training process and the holding people accountable and recognizing them, and then really investing into their development, I think really is what is the base for creating a really good culture. And there's some really good people also in our section that have done a really good job of doing that. And I could recognize a few of them, off the top of my head. I know Tom's son down at Arrowwood does a really good job with this. And I'm sure there's hundreds of golf professionals and leaders in our section that do a good job with this. Scott Hine down in San Diego does a wonderful job with this, and always has. Rob Oosterhouse up in the north, up at Sherwood, does a really good job with this. What you're looking for are leaders that are invested in your staff's development and success, and that's truly, again, what we're talking about here today. So if we go to the next slide, hire the right people, hire for show, train for dough. We had a rule here. We kind of deviated off of the rule a little bit occasionally, but for the most part, for many years, I had to sign off on every single hire at the facility. I still sort of sign off, but before we hired them, I actually had to sign off. We've kind of gotten away from that a little bit because now I trust some of our staff, and I'm always involved in the hiring and the training process. Depending on the level of the team member, I might be more involved, but I certainly like to be involved. I really try to stress that when we're hiring somebody, we're really looking for engaging personalities. And again, it depends on the job, who we're hiring, and why we're hiring them. But if you're talking about trying to hire somebody for a customer-facing position, whether that's outside service in the golf shop, a valet, somebody in food and beverage, a waiter, hostess, sommelier, whoever you're hiring, if they're customer-facing, they better have a very engaging personality. And obviously in the interview process and the get-to-know-you stage of these things, if that person you're interviewing isn't very engaging, or you don't feel like it's, you were lucky kind of to meet that person or spend time with that person, then it really does, to me, it doesn't really matter what their qualifications are or what their resume reads, because we're really excited about engaging personalities. People who aren't afraid to smile, aren't afraid to enjoy a laugh, aren't afraid to make those around them feel better. That's really, truly who we're always trying to hire. And certainly if you can get the impression from meeting them or talking to them that they believe in a team environment, I think the root of a lot of discontent at golf facilities or businesses is when you have several people who buy into a team mentality and support each other, and then there's an outlier who probably thinks more of themselves or believes the world evolves around them and no one else. Those are the people who can really pull down an operation and really lead to discord amongst the troops, or maybe leads to some issues that ends up getting presented back to the customer. So definitely a team first mentality. Yep.
I'm sorry, Eric. When you're talking about hiring the right people, and your note here says people with a career goal that you can assist with them. In terms of, can you elaborate a little bit on hiring frontline food and beverage staff, where so many of those individuals have goals that lie outside of our business? How do we channel and make sure we're hiring the right people and everybody's there buying in to the facility goal? How is that unique to food and beverage? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Obviously at all our properties, we're hiring different departments, and each one has its own unique proposition. But food and beverage, for what it is it can be problematic. I guess the best way to put it is to hire really good people and then retain them from a long period of time, and to keep them engaged is probably the hardest is in food and beverage. And I don't know, we've kind of talked about it that, like me personally being a golf person, food and beverage, we always laugh that food and beverage is sort of the necessary evil to running like a full operation, like being a GM. And then obviously if you're not, if you work at a facility and you don't run the food and beverage, then you're always complaining that you don't. And then once you do, you're complaining that now that you got stuck running the food and beverage. I don't know what it is. I think with food and beverage, it's very few people probably wake up every morning and say, by golly, I'm lucky to be in food and beverage today all day long. It's more of a servitude type of position. I think that's why it's super important that you focus on, again, the team mentality. Will they support the better of the whole? Are they kind, nice people? If they are, if they have worked in food and beverage, if you do reference check them, which I recommend you try to do some way, whether that's trying to get the real honest answer from somebody. But if these are team first people and they're kind and they have engaging personalities, and again, I put on here 13 months is the normal time frame that somebody usually works in a position before they move on. You're probably not going to get them to stay forever, and you're probably not going to keep them engaged forever, and they probably won't be that kind forever. But if you could try to find those people and then really, stay on top of them, you could hopefully get a few years out of them. They definitely care a lot about their hours. They care a lot about their tips. They care a lot about, it's a very much a personality issue that you're dealing with a lot. There's a lot of emotion in food and beverage for some reason. So I don't know if that helps to answer that, but I definitely think you need a leader in that department. And here's an example. You need somebody that runs your food and beverage department that definitely can connect with the staff, keep them engaged, hold them accountable, recognize them, and it's almost, and without I don't want to misspeak, but it's almost like you're dealing with teenagers a lot. Like, you know, they're irritable, they're irrational, they need a lot of love and attention, they need to be left alone more than you would think. So you just definitely have to be on top of it and look into it. And not every position we have at these facilities is like that, but sometimes you'll get a little crossover with outside service. It's similar to food and beverage at times. So, John, does that answer your question, or did I skate around it?
No, it certainly does. It's just, you know, when we're trying to create a team environment, and you said it, you hit it on the head. The job itself kind of has a selfish orientation to it with, I want my hours, I want my tips, and me, and that, you know, is contradictory to what we're trying to do. And it seems like, you know, many of us that are general managers, the food break us in a day. It can make or break us in an hour. And, you know, certainly, you know, speaking from my experience, I spend most of my day in food and beverage because that's the most volatile and sensitive aspect of our business, and the one that I can't trust the most, you know, even with good leaders in that department. So I was just curious what your system and mentality was in terms of, you know, getting that department to behave like, you know, tennis and fitness and golf and accounting and, you know, sales.
Yeah.
So,
again,
yeah.
and again, I would probably just stress that, again, the best thing you need to do is, whether it's you or someone else, you got to hire a manager or department head that's really got the ability to sort of rally the troops, and it's sort of like a cheerleader. And then you got to just really make sure you're hiring the right people. And the other thing is when you know, this presentation this morning is creating a winning culture, and just kind of really trying to help people get in the right spots for success. But I mean, as you probably know, and you know, people who've worked in our profession, I mean, we will hire people who we think will work out, and they just don't. And you know, maybe we messed something up along the way with how we trained them, or maybe we overpromised them. There's always an answer to something. But what you have to be willing to do probably is to move on. You know, in food and beverage, you know, you might hire 5 people, and one of those 5 you just know isn't going to work out. But the sooner you can, you know, maybe move that person back out into the workforce and get back into a better team environment, the better off you are. I think where sometimes failure happens, and this is what I've witnessed, is where we've hired people and we've trained them, we've hired them, we've trained them, we've done everything we can, and then they've sort of become a sour apple, and then we held on to them too long. And I think when these types of people, that whatever that is, whatever negativity that flows through them, you witness that usually within the first 30 to 60 days. So if you witness something that's off-putting, and especially if it's more than once in that first 30 to 60 days, I would strongly recommend you decide to maybe move on if you can, because usually those people are the ones that end up being the ones that stick with you forever and become like a thorn in your side. All right, moving on to the next slide. Discover and identify your team members' strongest skills. So part of this is something that I take into consideration when we hire people, and I really try to stress this with our department heads. So usually when you're hiring somebody, there's a need. So I really work with our department heads to identify if we're going to hire somebody, what do we really truly need? What do we want their skill sets to be? And then I try to match that up with somebody we hire. And it's not always the case where we're able to do that. And sometimes we go out in one direction and find somebody who has a skill set in a different, and we just have to move the pieces of the puzzle, which is usually your staff, to best fit everybody. But, you know, we're trying to identify and hire an assistant golf professional, and we knew that down the road we're going to need some help in teaching, and we knew we needed some help with our women's programming and our junior golf programming. So luckily, as we interviewed a few people, one of the persons we interviewed was really strong, and she was a female. She played college golf. She loves junior golf, and she wants to teach but also stay in the program and become a PGA member and possibly operate a facility. So, you know, when you're hiring people, you want to definitely hire them for the right skill set. And then, you know, the other thing is what I really challenge all my team to do is to really work with their team and understand what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what they enjoy doing, what they don't enjoy doing, and really trying to fit these people in the right spots. I think a lot of times where I've made mistakes or where I've seen my operations not work as effectively as they should is when people were put in positions that just weren't their strong suits. So that's one thing I'd recommend that you do is you communicate, talk to your team, figure them out a little bit, challenge them, give them little projects, see how they produce, and then move them in the right positions that help them achieve the most. And obviously work to improve that skill set. So, whether it's somebody like who enjoys accounting or HR or tournament operations, or maybe they're really good at facility management and cart fleet upkeep, whatever that is. And then if they enjoy that and they're doing that for you, then you try to find ways to support them with continuing education or to make sure they have the supplies and things like that that will help them succeed the best that they can. I put in here, involve all staff, just don't direct them and assign responsibility accordingly. I really think it's important that you don't just tell somebody to go do something and then just expect them to do it really well, or do it the way you want them to do it. I find that when we do that, we make mistakes, and it just leads to, again, more angst and animosity, and maybe not as successful as we should be. But I say, if you know that you have somebody that's decent at doing something, and they want to do it, and you assign them to do it, then you work with them and help them do you guide them and show them what you want and how you want it done. You then try to put some sort of metric behind it, whether that's, how do you determine success and failure again? And then you need to recognize how they do compared to that. But you definitely have to involve your staff and not just direct them. You have to lead by example. You have to demonstrate what you want and really communicate, if not over-communicate to them, and then keep moving on. I put on here, rotate responsibility and monitor stress levels. At our facility at Monarch Beach, we're fairly busy, and we have at times a lot of stress, whether it's our clientele, ownership changes, budget goals. But it can be a fairly stressful facility at times. So, part of my job and my responsibility is to monitor the stress level of everybody. And when I find that people's stress levels become too high, then we have to either give them a little break or offer more support. And the other thing is engagement. So on the one side, you could be too stressed out and not really focused and really not doing a great job. And on the other side, you might not be as engaged. You might be bored. You might have a little burnout from too much stress or difficult situations with complicated customers. So I also like to each year, and we kind of review this at the annual reviews that we do here, but we like to rotate responsibility as well. Just because I hired somebody to do one thing doesn't mean they have to do that forever. And as much as I care about their stress levels, I care as much, if not more, about their engagement levels. And then obviously cross-train if possible or feasible. Actually both feasible and possible. I find that, especially with your manager levels up, by cross-training them in other departments, it really gives them a better understanding of how their department or what they do interacts with their fellow managers in other departments, and it kind of opens their eyes to how things work and don't work appropriately. And you find that with a little bit of cross-training, the team works a little bit better together, communicates a little bit better, understands the challenges and difficulties that each individual department has compared to the other. I also recommend anybody on the call that has a career path of management or obviously general management or any higher level management position, that cross-training is really important. I'm sure that any GM has spent time cross-training. Now, whether they cross-trained on the job, like some of us have, or whether they were able to spend some time in different departments before they were put in a role of leadership, who knows? But I think that cross-training is really important, whether that's an hour, a day, a week, a month, or a year. Whatever amount of cross-training you can do will certainly benefit yourself and your team. And I also recommend that you do a little bit of cross-training too with some of your staff, like in our case, our outside service staff, we need to make sure that somebody can valet park a car, can caddy, can work in outside service, can clean a golf cart. I mean, you have to be able to do different things in case somebody doesn't show up or you're short-staffed. And the same with food and beverage. In our case, could be banquets, the cafe, the beverage carts. You want to be able to do 3 or 4 different things. So definitely cross-training is important. This quote, talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. That's by Michael Jordan. I think just having Michael Jordan on your team produces championships, but I don't know. The next slide, create a learning training environment. I've really done a lot of effort here in the last 5 years, is really trying to create a training learning environment. I want the team here to move up and move on to better and bigger things. I think, again, if you just direct people to do things, they don't always buy in, or they don't always understand why you're doing it. So, really educating people and communicating to them. But I think it starts with the onboarding process. I think here, at Monarch, we've done a better job at that. I still think it's an area of improvement. I'd probably challenge just about anybody to continue to improve the way they hire and onboard and train their new staff. A lot of times you're hiring and throwing people into the fire kind of when you need them, and you not necessarily take a proactive approach and get people trained up and hired before you actually need them. So that part of it is an issue that needs to be addressed sometimes. But in our case, when we hire somebody new, they certainly spend some time with our admin, who goes over like the employee handbook and some of the general rules of the operation. They'll spend time with me going through a customer service training program, and also an education on ownership and management and our resort, and sort of just the vision that I see. We go through that vision statement. I certainly expect and require department heads to spend time with all of our new staff, our new team members. It's very important that the team members understand the goals and the direction and the requirements that their department head have. Where I've seen this break down is when a department head isn't that confident, or doesn't communicate well enough, or doesn't share with their staff the things they really truly want to see from that new team member, and the things they truly don't want to see, the topics and things to avoid. So I recommend that you work with your department heads and make sure that they're doing the same thing. And then obviously, all of our new team members will spend time with somebody we designate as a trainer. And whether it's several people in a particular department, or if it's just one person. But as you can see here, several people take ownership of trying to bring somebody new onto a property, get them trained up effectively. And then the other thing is, and I don't know if I get to it back again, but just because you hire somebody and you train them, you just don't walk away and think they're going to be doing it all always the same way, the right way. So it's very important that you reconnect with that new team member 30 days after employment. Are they following the rules and procedures the way you wanted them to? Are they comfortable? Are they still engaged? Do they still seem very happy? Are they buying into the team environment? Like, you just can't throw them out there and then hope like heck they do it, and then when they don't, just go, well, that didn't work out. Like, you have to invest. You have to personally invest into their development as well. And then obviously, 6 months and then a year, you definitely have to keep checking in on them, making sure that they're doing what they need to do. I recommend that you just have really good communication, and we do that here with a weekly we do a weekly staff meeting. That's very important. We discuss the staff morale in each department. We discuss communication. We discuss making sure that everybody's on board with what we're doing. And I find that communication really needs to be a focus of any good general manager, department head. Communication is key. And, they hold people accountable. Communication holds people accountable. And good communication goes both ways. It's not just, you talking to the staff and telling the staff what to do or how to do it. It's the staff communicating back to you if what you've told them is working, or why it's not working, or how do we continue to make improvement and things like that. So, you know, I find here at Monarch that we have a really good staff that does communicate well, and it's certainly something that we've been working at and will continue to work towards. And then I do find it's really important that you share with your team, all your team members, all the way down to the frontline employees, what your customers are saying about them and about your facility. And you know, this isn't always the easiest thing. You know, when it comes to this form of feedback, it's not always positive, and you know, it calls people out sometimes, and it challenges things that maybe you do or don't like. And but you have to take a step back and look at this customer and employee feedback and look at it and just say, listen, I mean, this is important, and maybe some of it's irrational and some of it doesn't make sense, and that's the kind of, at the end of the day, those are some of the slices of the pizza you don't have to eat. But a lot of times when we get this type of feedback, there's something in there that we need to address, or we might need to change, or it might remind us of something that we need to focus on in the future. So the next slide, I'll just keep ripping through this. Hold team members accountable. I learned at the bottom, I learned from a Steve Soul, a friend of mine, teaching pro, and I remember he used to talk about tacit approval. And you know, tacit approval is when somebody does something wrong, or they do something you don't like, but you don't really do anything about it. And I think a lot of times where places fail is when that probably occurs. And obviously, if there's something that goes wrong, or if there is some sort of operational failure, you have about 24 hours to address that in a timely manner. And whether it's a customer complaint, or somebody gets hurt, or you know, there's definitely something wrong that could negatively affect the morale of the team or something. You need to address that within 24, at the worst case, 48 hours. And again, you know, that goes back to communication, and that goes back to ownership, and goes back to engagement. And I probably drive my staff nuts with this one. But I find that again, people get busy and they kind of push things off to the side, and it's a little uncomfortable. And again, if you can create a culture where all issues are dealt with, you know, at the face value, and you're honest, and you have open communication, and you do it in a timely manner, that suddenly you have fewer issues, and suddenly those issues can be taken care of more quickly with maybe sometimes staff either figuring it out on their own or communicating amongst themselves. And when you don't do these things, when you allow tacit approval, when you don't address things within 24 or 48 hours, when you're not honest, when you're not timely, that's when it becomes a bigger issue, and it involves multiple people, and that's what leads to terminations and you know, HR issues, and again, angst amongst the crew, and who knows what else it could lead to. But it certainly leads to poor customer service, and it devalues your quality of product. So again, in that case, you know, you want to be honest, you want to do it in a timely manner. And the other thing is, you know, there's going to be peaks and valleys with everybody's operation and with everybody's performance, and it's important that you address those as well. And again, hold people accountable and do what you need to do. You know, so the next one is important, and this is probably one that I've gotten better at over the years. You know, when I started, I probably just felt like if I worked hard and kept my mouth shut and did things I didn't like, then everybody else should do the same thing, and that doesn't always work that way. And I've learned better to support my team and listen and respond and follow up. And again, I think it's very important. Twice a year, we will do an annual, or twice a biannual team member questionnaire, where we send a questionnaire to all our staff, and it has 10 or so questions on it. And if John will remind me, I'll share ours with you as well. But the questionnaire is important because if the staff fills it out, you have enough of them that fill it out, you'll get a gauge of the morale of your team, and hopefully they'll identify some areas of concern that you could potentially address, or you know, they could recognize a team member who's been going above and beyond, but yet you maybe have overlooked it. Who knows? But that information really is beneficial for your your health. And then we've created a wellness committee. The wellness committee meets 3 or 4 times a year. I think we have one coming up next week. And it's usually, there's a representative from each department head, or each department. And it's usually not a department head. It's usually could be a supervisor. It could be just a customer-facing part-time hourly employee. You're hoping to put some people on these committees that have a personality and they're comfortable sharing experiences, and you challenge them to kind of speak with their peers to come up with issues and obstacles and opportunities that the facility can make improvements. So we do these wellness committees, and again, the idea behind it is that if you address the issues at hand, the wellness of the overall group will be positive, and the overall health will be one, and the facility health and the operational health will be positive, and therefore it'll be easier for you to achieve your goals. This third bullet point: make reviews meaningful and just don't go through the motions. Nothing really chaps my ass more than when a department head, who, we're all challenged to do annual reviews, if not more than an annual review with some staff. But you got to make sure that you take the time to fill out the document, provide, good, honest feedback, address the positives as much as the, opportunities, the negatives. Certainly engage the customer or engage your staff when you do these reviews, and ask questions. Are they happy? Are they content? Are we moving towards their career goal appropriately? Are they getting continuing education? Do they like the communication? Do they like how we're recognizing people? You got to ask questions and ask for feedback along with providing feedback. As much as I tell people, if I'm doing a review and there's something we have to address that's not quite up to speed, I definitely look at it on a 360-degree way. Am I a part of that? Am I responsible for that? Did I support this team member as much as I could have to allow them to succeed or fail? And I recommend that you challenge your department heads or whoever it is doing these reviews to do the same as well. So making sure that those are done in a timely manner at least once a year. And you spend, you don't spend 2 minutes with the guest or the employee. You spend some time with them so that you can really re-engage with them and really get them motivated to keep moving forward and to follow the goals. A little quote here: coming together is a beginning, staying together is a progress, and working together is a success. Henry Ford. I thought that was a good one. I put on here, recognize excellence. I think the more you can recognize your team and show that they're doing the right things at the right time and following your brand promise, the better off you can be. We've achieved some success here with that at Monarch, and we go to the extent of, if somebody recognizes a team member in a review, we'll post that review, and then those who get their name mentioned in that month get put into a drawing, and then we give away a gift card to the team member who wins that lottery or the drawing based on being recognized that month. And I find it to be really nice being able to share those positive reviews with our team members. But I really think that, again, as much as this is about culture and trying to live up to your brand promise, your vision statement, recognizing excellence can come in many different ways. And, I believe that if, we're in the sales and marketing, entertainment, hospitality, that's what we do. And, everything we sell here, whether it's food and beverage or retail or, cardholder programs or tournaments or rental clubs, whatever we sell here, whatever we upsell, lessons, I'd love to tie in a commission or a bonus with our staff. And, I think that the more incentivized the staff is to succeed, the more they will do that. And so part of this recognize excellence is creating a really good way to reward your staff for achieving, budget and daily goals or monthly goals, and making sure that you can compensate for them. And that too leads to a longer tenured employee and a more engaged employee. Surprise staff with thank yous. You know, I've always enjoyed when somebody has said thank you to me when I wasn't expecting it, or, you know, I don't do it all the time, but I feel like I do it a fairly decent amount of time, that when we have a big event and I could tell the staff has been working really hard, I like to send them a little note. Or we just had a really nice month of May, and I'm sure most of the people on this call did too, if they were open. And, you know, as we did our staff meeting in May and we made budget, you know, even considering COVID and all the difficulties that we're all facing, we had the best May in the history of the facility. And, you know, I brought in a couple bottles of champagne and just did a toast at our staff meeting. And it's just little things that just surprise the staff and say thank you, whether it's a gift card to a restaurant, or a little check, a little bonus on the back end of a monthly paycheck, or champagne at a staff meeting. It's just the little things that I think make a difference. So again, I think I've bought into the recognized excellence, and I could tell you my company has done things for me, and ownership has done things for me in the same regard, and I'll never forget those things that they've done and how they've done it, and when it was least expected. And it helps you out during the difficult times to keep motivated and keep engaged and keep moving forward. This is a slide that's really important. I'd like to thank the millennials for this. So I'm not quite sure, you know, 15 years ago, I don't know if work-life balance was a main topic on, well, there was no TED Talks, but you know, work-life balance is something you hear a lot nowadays, and obviously with COVID, you're going to hear more about it. But I've kind of bought into this a lot the last few years. I remember I sat through a presentation one time where like a high-ranking, successful professional, I was on a panel, I think, and I want to say that somebody brought up the topic, and there was 4 or 5 of us, and 2 or 3 of the people on this panel talked about how they were the first to show up at work and the last to leave, and they worked every day, and they worked all night, and you know, then I think somebody in the audience probably as a joke asked, well, how many of you up there are still married? And like the 3 guys or the 2 people who talked about how all they did was work, like they were both divorced, and where the other guys were saying, you know, I tried to prioritize my family and my life. I tried to create a work-life balance, and they were the ones who were probably doing better overall. Although everybody at that table had won an award and were leading a reputable club in the country or a company, you know, 2 or 3 of them were divorced and probably had to go through some serious issues. You know, and I don't necessarily think any of us have jobs are great enough that they take precedent over our families or over our own mental and you know, our own mental health. So I recommend that as you connect with your staff, and including yourself, that you take a look at, you know, are you doing everything you can to support people so that they can spend quality time with their family, whether they are trying to have a family or they have a young family or their kids are, you know, whatever stage their children are in, or if they don't even have kids and they're trying to create a family. You got to support those people so that when they do come to work, they're refreshed, they're happy, and they're engaged. So another thing is when people want time off, you know, I always challenge our team, you know, try to find a way to give people the time off they want and deserve, and, you know, try not to be the person who doesn't allow people to take time off. When you work at an operation and you don't allow people to take time off, you haven't hired enough people. You know, when it comes to the holidays, and, you know, if you expect your staff to work every Mother's Day, Father's Day, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Labor Day, Memorial Day, if you have staff and you expect them to work every one of those days, they're not going to last forever, and they're going to leave. You should be able to rotate your teams to allow them to take a vacation, to take a few days off, to play in a tournament, or do whatever it is they like to do. So definitely I encourage you to work through that. Obviously, before COVID, you know, if you could give your staff the ability to work from home a little bit, especially if they have young children or those sorts of things, you know. But now with COVID, you know, obviously for those of us who are at the course every day trying to manage what we're doing, but there might be some people that you work with or around that don't necessarily have to be at work all day long, and maybe give them an opportunity to go home and work a little bit from home. Obviously, engage with your staff to learn a little bit more about their personal lives, and check in with them on occasion. I think it goes a long way, whether they're struggling with a physical issue, or again, maybe it's a new family and you're offering support, or maybe they do things outside of golf and you're just checking in to see how they're doing with their hobbies and things like that. But again, and finally, stress and prioritize your family, starting with your own. We work hard enough and long enough at work, and now with the cell phones and the laptop computers, some of us don't really turn off. So it's definitely important that you prioritize your staff and their families so that they can relax a little bit and decompress and re-energize and come back stronger and better than ever. Finally, my last slide is succession planning. And in regards to succession planning, that's just simply meaning if you took all yourself included and your department heads and your supervisors and asked yourself, what happens if they just disappeared tomorrow? Who's going to come in and pick up the slack, and who's going to fill in that line, or who's going to jump in and support you just as well? So I work really hard at making sure that there's good succession planning, when again possible, when feasible, so that every department head is supported with another employee or a supervisor or manager. And it's very important that's where the training comes into play. If I go on vacation, or Brandon Delgado, our director of golf, leaves, or our tournament director leaves, Tony Lanza, or if we had our one of our teaching pros left, and our marketing person had a child, you had to be able and capable to pick up the slack and to cover for them, so that when they return, the operation didn't get negatively affected and there wasn't a downturn. The excuse that somebody was out, or that, there should never be an excuse that, well, that person wasn't here that week, or they were on vacation and something slipped, or those things, that doesn't make any sense. You should be able to keep that operation moving forward in a positive manner, and you need to be able to support each other. So when it comes to succession planning here, that also might mean, what if, I've had team members here and staff that have gone on to bigger and better jobs, and I try to invest in their efforts, whether that's resume building, or what jobs should they apply for, or be a reference for them. I would much rather be involved in that process. For one, I know when or where they're going, and two, it helps me understand how much I need to dive into the succession planning, and three, it really allows the team member to have good open communication with me, so that I can help them and they can help us. And I find that by doing this, my team members have stayed with me longer, and then when they've gone to other jobs, we've been able to celebrate that, and we've done it in an open, communicative way, so that I was able to replace their positions, so that the operation again didn't go backwards while we were short, or we were trying to hire somebody while the person was leaving. So again, that kind of concludes the presentation. There's a lot of information on here, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do at Monarch, and I think we've done a fairly decent job, is really just support the team, make sure that the team has good mental health, that they're engaged, that that the team is buying into the brand promise. And by doing all these things, and by allowing us to be in this position, it allows us to work at a very highly effective manner, where we've been able to, like, for example, the last couple months, it's the busiest this facility has ever been. And, a lot of places, you could see where there could be more stress, or it could be taxing on people. But again, we've attacked it, and we've done it in a very positive and honest way. And I think because of that, now the staff is still engaged. They've been rewarded financially. And when I look at people as I walk into the facility every morning, I look at their eyes and I see opportunity. I don't see them hiding. I don't see them wishing they were somewhere else. I see them being somewhere they want to be, and to me that might quite possibly be the most rewarding thing I get to see. John, that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lohman. If someone's going to present on leadership and creating a winning team culture, you're the guy for sure. You've done it at several properties over the 20 years that I've been in the industry with you. Not just at Monarch Beach, but I think Black Gold and Oak Creek come to mind. But thank you very, very much for taking the time to help educate the section. On behalf of the Education Committee for the section, we thank you for your time this morning. Had a couple of questions that have come in from the panel. In terms of getting everybody on board, so many golf operations, particularly in outside service, sometimes inside service as well, hire retirees that sometimes can be difficult to get them to buy into the team goal, not being so career motivated because obviously they're at the end of their careers and just kind of looking for the reason they came to you in the first place was for selfish reasons because they just want to work at a golf course so they could play free golf. How do you get them to buy in to the team goal?
You know, I think again it starts at the hiring process. I think when you talk to people, if you're going to hire a player assistant marshal, first tee host, what have you, and let's say they are slightly seniored, and let's say this is their second or third career. I mean, when you're hiring them, in that communication, in that process, you got to address the fact that they would be working at a facility that does have a team first attitude, and this is how everybody supports everybody, and this is what we require from the folks that work in this position, and you know, you kind of lay it out in front of them, and then you make sure that they, you know, is this something you're comfortable with, and this is something you can buy into, and how they answer that question should be the determining factor whether or not you work for them. And you know, obviously, if somebody in the first 5 minutes of one of those interviews is all they're talking about is employee benefits and how often they get to play, most of the time, you know, if you've done this a few times, you probably realize that they might not be the right choice. But again, you got to do your best to try to hire the person that you think is going to jump in and buy into the team environment. And then, you know, again, where I think where we fail here occasionally, where I've seen failure happen, is, you know, you just throw them out there, you train them, you get them on the job, you throw them out there, they start to work, and then you kind of walk away. You know, you kind of feel like, well, they probably know what they're doing, and it's not that complicated, and you know, go out and get it. And where I find where we fail is if we don't continually check in with them and ask, how are you doing? Are you getting what you wanted out of this? Are you comfortable with what we're asking you to do? So it's that communication and getting them to buy in. We've noticed it, John, and whoever asked it, it's a great question. When we reopened out of COVID, we opened up 20% busier than we've ever been, and that was very taxing on our team, but I think it was the most taxing on the marshal staff. And we're trying to figure out why, and part of it is probably because they were so set in their way with how we did things and how busy we were and how we rotated everybody. And also about half the staff didn't come back because of their decision based on their age or their home life and what have you. So, you know, I think if there was anything that we could have done a little differently or a little bit better reopening is probably addressing it with those folks. And we've done a better job here in the last couple of weeks, and we've had to hire a few more people. But that's a great question. I think, again, it starts with one-on-one communication, involving them, and just not just assuming everything is fine. Any other questions, John? I think you said you might have another one.
No, those are all the questions from the attendees this morning. Again, Eric, thank you so much for doing this. Want to remind everybody that we are no longer mandating the Catalyst quiz for the attendees that are on the live call. For all 47 of us that are on this morning, you'll get your MSR credit simply for being on and attending 75% of this webinar. We do still do the quiz and attach it to the YouTube recording, and you'll find that on the Catalyst landing page on SCPGA.com. We do that so that people can access past Catalyst, watch the Catalyst, take the quiz, and still get MSR credit for it. And also want to remind everybody that next Thursday we have, it's like almost like it's the executive panel on the Catalyst month with Eric Lohman presenting today. He's our secretary for the section. Next week, our vice president, Robin Shelton, and GM at Seacliff Country Club is going to be presenting on Just Do It, how Nike has surpassed their competition with their marketing strategy. So encourage everybody to tune in for that next Thursday. And then the following Thursday, very excited, and thank you to Tom Addis for bringing in Mr. Mark King, who was the CEO of TaylorMade Adidas for a number of years. He's now the CEO of Taco Bell, and he's going to be presenting in 2 weeks, and that will be very exciting. But everybody, thank you very much for supporting the Catalyst. Eric, thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, stay sane.
Thank you.